Welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us. There's 4 of you on the panel. We are now moving on to this next discussion where we're talking about helping athletes articulate their emotions, both positive and negative. What an interesting topic. I'm going to leave you guys with Quentin, who is going to be moderating the panel today. So we're here for about 40 minutes of discussion on that topic. And with that, I'm going to let Quentin introduce himself and then each of you as well. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Miriam. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Q, or Quentin Williams, as you can see on my name tag here. It's great to be here. And today I'm joined by 4 amazing panelists. I have Shira, I have Neha. I'll let them all introduce themselves in a minute. But I have Kimberly and Erika. But my name is Q Williams. I'm actually a men's coach for former athletes. I got into this personally through my own journey through sport. I played college football at Northwestern as well as baseball, and that transition was very interesting and unique for me. And this topic of expressing your emotions is so important to me because I lead men's groups and I lead discussions where I really bring men back into their emotions, which is for a lot of athletes and for a lot of men in particular, it's interesting, it's tough. And so I'm really excited to engage in this conversation, ask some incredible questions, and get to the bottom of this. So I'm going to lead us off with Shira, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself. Each of you, I'll go through the line. But Shira, please first.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Dr. Shira Oretzky. I'm a clinical and sports psychologist. I am contracted with University of San Diego and San Diego State University athletic departments. And I have a private practice in Del Mar where I specialize in working with elite athletes on both performance and mental well-being.
Amazing. Thank you. Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Shira. I'm going to bump it over to Neha, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Neha Obery. I am a mental health therapist and a former professional tennis player. And in my practice, I work with athletes. I'm really focused on the transition piece, transitioning out of sports. But I also work with regular people who have a lot of the same issues that we are going to talk about today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Neha. Thanks for being here. Erika, you're next.
Hi, everybody. My name is Erika Fay, and I am in Chicago, Illinois. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist who's had a private practice for the past 10 years, but I've been licensed as a therapist for a little over 20, so I'll date myself a little bit here. I'm also a certified life mastery consultant, so I work with athletes as a coach on the performance and transition away from sports side. So I'm really passionate about supporting athletes. I'm thrilled to be here. I love Athlete Soul, and thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Kimberly, take it away.
Hi, I'm Kim O'Brien. I am a clinical social worker and a former Harvard hockey player. And right now I work both at Boston Children's Hospital in the female athlete program, where I work with athletes directly, doing therapy with them. And I also started a private practice called Unlimited Resilience, which is all of our clinicians are athletes and everyone we serve are athletes. And it's all a telehealth service.
Wonderful. Well, I'm going to kick it right off and get into some questions. So let's just start really broadly, really simply, and get really clear on what an emotion is. Like, where do these things come from? And I want to ask this question directly to Erika. You're actually unmuted, so this is perfect. Erika, it's good to see you. So what are these things? Like, where do they come from? How do we, come to have emotions?
So it's interesting. The more and more I've learned about this, the more I realize that our emotions are simply a kind of byproduct of our thinking. And so there's a conscious awareness of our thinking, obviously, and then we also have a subconscious mind that kind of has an undercurrent of all of the things that have ever happened in our lives. And there's different emotions that are supercharged with different events that have happened in our lives. And so some of those can be triggered, by something, even if they've been years and years ago, can be triggered in the current reality of your life, even if there's not, a ton of similarity. But I think they're kind of like, basically they're kind of imprinted in our subconscious minds. And then as and I think everyone has experience with this. If I invite you to tell me about the time you had your biggest failure, and you start to tell me that story, you'll start to generate the feelings that you generated while it was happening. So our thoughts are really, really connected to our emotions. And I think it's a powerful distinction to note. The more and more that I've learned about this, and the more I've practiced with it myself, you can actually the more you practice with the awareness of your thinking, you can start to notice when you're starting to go down a train of, whatever kind of thought pattern that will create different emotions for you. And then the mastery work comes in, and being able to kind of pause and breathe, and that goes into mindfulness and all of that kind of stuff. But I would say, from my experience, thoughts kind of follow, or thoughts precede feelings. And some of those are in our subconscious mind, though, which can be kind of difficult to get ahead of, because we have to work to kind of reprogram some of that.
Wonderful, perfect perspective. And so if I'm hearing you correctly there, Erika, it starts really with our thoughts, and often our thoughts are sort of inspired and maybe even sort of formatted based on our experiences in our lives and what we're telling ourselves and what our internal thoughts are. And of course, there's the opportunity to rewire those and reform those, which we'll definitely get to some questions around that. So who can tell me a little bit more about these emotions? What kinds of emotions can we experience? Maybe Dr. Shira, I'd love for you to jump in on this topic. What types of emotions do we feel?
Sure. And just to kind of piggyback on what Erika was saying, I like to think of emotions almost as our internal GPS. So basically what happens is we have, there's a stimuli in the environment. Maybe we experience something that feels scary or dangerous. Our body then goes into that kind of fight or flight state. So our heart rate might increase, adrenaline might start pumping through our body, our muscles constrict, and then the brain interprets those physical sensations, and then our emotions kind of form from there. And I think, a huge piece of emotion is it's an evolutionary survival mechanism as humans, right? We respond to both pleasurable stimuli in the environment, things like our favorite food or positive relationships, and want more of that. And then we also kind of can respond to unpleasant things or things that feel dangerous, as, backing off from this or doing less of this. So I think our feelings kind of help us to make decisions about what's good for us and what's not.
I love that perspective. I see emotions as an internal compass, and becoming aware of them actually can be really empowering. And, a framework that I like to use are kind of like the 5 main emotions that I at least work with are like joy, shame, fear, anger, and sadness. And what's so interesting about shame actually is that it's almost like a man-made emotion. It's something that we create in our mind about what we should or shouldn't do or how things should be. And it's so interesting how all of these really do start with thought. So thank you, Dr. Shira. I would love to pass this next question over to Kimberly, or Kim. I know you might go by Kim. How do I help somebody become comfortable maybe with some of these more negative emotions, something that they're feeling that they're not comfortable with. They don't know how to sit with it.
Yeah, I think that's a really great question, and it's something that I work with athletes on all the time. I think the key is that they first can identify what it is they are feeling, because I think a lot of times athletes and all individuals feel something odd and unwanted that is distressing, but they're not quite clear on what exactly that is. So I think one skill I use, I can tell what it is now and share it with people, but I use the RAIN skill. It's R stands for recognizing. So you recognize what emotion it is you're feeling. A is you're allowing it to be there. So, which is kind of counterintuitive, because you think, why would I want this feeling to be there when I don't like it. But you need to allow it to be there so that you can do the I, which is investigate. So you investigate, okay, what is this about? What are the related thoughts that I'm having to this emotion? Did anything precipitate this emotion? That sort of thing. And then at the end, it kind of stands for two things, non-identify and nurture. The non-identify is important because you want to help the individual, the athlete, separate themselves from the feeling. So they are not what they're feeling. It's just a feeling that will pass through them like a wave and doesn't have to stick with them. And then the nurture piece is you want to help them learn skills and things they can do to help themselves feel the opposite of that unwanted emotion. So for instance, if what you're feeling is anxiety, the opposite of anxiety, maybe something like relaxation, tranquility. So you'd want to help them figure out what skills they can do for that. If it's depression and low, feeling low and unmotivated, you want to figure out something that may provide a little more energy or something like that for them in the moment.
I love that breakdown. That's such an awesome breakdown, Rain. And I think the I there, I'm sorry, the A, allowing, I think that's one of the hardest things for people to do, is really to just sit with it, just to be present with it. And I'm curious, like how you approach this, Kim, like in your practice, but how do you have people even slow down enough to allow it to be there? Like what are some practices you would give maybe an athlete?
Well, I do this a lot with them in session, where we'll be, talk about what is the feeling that is going on. And when we do allow it to be there and investigate it, it's not just talking verbally about, what it is that's going on. It's also, what do you feel in your body? Because usually when you feel a certain emotion, there's an associated physical sensation with it. So just kind of helping them see all these different connections, because what will happen is the next time they start feeling that sometimes the physical sensation comes first. And so they'll start to notice the start of that physical sensation, and then they'll learn the skills they need to kind of bring themselves down or shift themselves a little bit to help them. But I think the acceptance of that negative emotion is absolutely the hardest part. And a lot of times it's kind of helping them understand why it helps to do that before actually telling them to do that. So they've got to understand why this will be helpful before diving into these negative feelings that they don't even want to talk about or experience.
And I love that. I love that the last piece of your puzzle really is like non-identifying, which is, we can have these emotions, we can experience them, but they don't define us. And actually, it is a compass, right? So identifying them, allowing them to be, allows us to almost digest them, right? And I want to actually put the next question over to Neha. What happens after that? Like, how do we help them actually articulate what they're feeling and actually get some use out of this information?
Yeah, I think all the speakers so far have kind of alluded to this practice of labeling your emotions and being able to, have someone facilitate that. And it sometimes looks like the therapist or the other person saying, are you feeling this? Are you feeling that? And a lot of times athletes might not stay in the feeling state when they're talking about their emotions. They might talk about their performance or some anxiety that they're having. And it's bringing them back to, what does this feel like for you in your body? Name me an emotion, and maybe even just giving them a bunch of adjectives to say, does this sound right? Does that sound right? Because we often as athletes want to disassociate from the feelings that are negative because they might impact performance, so they scare us sometimes. But when you label them and you are able to kind of recognize, this is what I said, and saying it out loud, it makes it more manageable, it makes it more approachable, and then you can start adding sensations to that and other kind of signifiers and understanding the triggers behind them. So it starts kind of with identifying and labeling, and then working from there. And sometimes it will take a few sessions when, I ask you, how was your day? They'll be 10 steps ahead about the future, the tournament they have to play. It's like, no, I asked you, how are you feeling right now in your body? So you constantly have to bring them back, which is sort of counterintuitive for an athlete. When you think of an athlete, you think, oh, this person is in sync, mind, body, all the time. But we see that that's actually not the case. We do so much numbing out, so much ignoring so that we can do what we need to do to function. And yes, there are very positive things about that, but where it gets dangerous and where it can impact our performance is when we're not dealing with it and when we don't find ways to build our resilience. And, you know, some of the things that everyone's talking about, they take a lot of time. They take sessions, they take work, they take hours and years. And athletes are looking for some quick fixes. What do I do when I'm on the pitch right then and there? What do I do when I miss a ball, 3 second serve double faults in a row? What am I supposed to do? Panic is set in. And I think what is important to understand is that if you're able to quickly recognize or quicker you're able to recognize, regroup, refocus with the tools you do off the court or off the pitch, it gets faster and easier when you're there.
Beautiful breakdown. And I think we're kind of bringing it back to this sense of, you know, really emotional awareness. I think of as a mindfulness practice. You know, you do think of athletes as being some of the most in tune and present people, right? Like you have to be if you're going to perform at the top of your game. Yet off the court or off the field or out of the pool, we often can't be present with emotions. And I want to pass this next question over to Dr. Shira, because I loved your compass example. And I want to ask you, where do you think some of these maybe stored emotions come from for athletes? You work with a lot of athletes. Like, where do you think, you know, some of these more repressed emotions come from? What's responsible for that?
I think that's a great question. I think, you know, positive emotions, the joys of winning the championship or an Olympic medal, you know, those feel so good. Whereas, you know, some of the more negative emotions, like we were saying, you know, the disappointments or the losses, those are not as comfortable. And so I think, you know, there's been kind of a piece in the sport culture of kind of pushing those aside, or, you know, a stigma around emotion. And I think it's important that we begin to kind of open up more dialogue around this topic. And I think, you know, as we can kind of help athletes to speak more openly around it, it really can be so impactful and help them to feel kind of more in control. I often will use the analogy of like a physical injury, right? I mean, if an athlete starts to experience pain in their body, you know, if they continue to ignore it, typically it creates an injury that's going to get worse and that's going to impede their performance more. But if they can address it early on, if they can, you know, communicate with their athletic trainer, ICE, rehab, you know, put all the supports in place around that, then it gives them kind of the best chance of healing it as quickly as possible and having the least negative impact on performance. And so I'll use that, you know, as a model which they can typically relate to. So the quicker we're able to kind of identify these feelings and work through them, you know, then we learn kind of a healthy way of managing our full range of emotions. And that really is at the cornerstone of resilience, being able to, you know, I can feel whatever I feel, including all the negative emotions, and I can still be okay. I mean, I think that's really true strength.
Beautiful reflection there. I love that. And I think that what's interesting about the repressed emotions is they show up in a really unique way. You know, they might show up in a sudden outburst or an outbreak in some sort of emotional capacity. And you know, that's always the hardest to see, is when something has been repressed. I want to pass this next question over to Dr. Erika, please. What role do you feel like life off the court or outside of the arena plays into like performance? And like, where do emotions that live off the field, do those have a place on the field? And, you know, how do you reconcile that with an athlete?
Well, I think that's, you know, if someone had a magic pill for that, I think everyone would be taking it, right? considering the fact that we are more than just our sports, which is important to highlight, and I know everybody believes that who's here, I think it's important to just have an awareness, like we all are human and we're having a human experience. And so, you know, like in my marriage and family therapy practice, I was seeing athletes at the most elite levels, you know, having difficulty in their marriages, and it was pouring over into other areas of their lives. And so it's unrealistic to expect that we would just be in a silo. And at the same time, athletes are better able to focus than the general population. So it's kind of a both and, I think, and, you know, to pull in something else that we're talking about, like being able to speak on emotion and having language for emotion and kind of what to do when you're feeling a negative emotion. And just also just, I know that everyone is aware of this, but the spectrum of feeling, I mean, like being sad is very different than being clinically depressed. And so like, I think as we're repressing, we make it more likely for us to actually kind of symptomize and become more, you know, if we're trying to repress sadness over and over and over again, we may become depressed after a time. And so it's just, this is kind of a little bit kind of backing up to the question you asked, Dr. Shira, but to kind of answer your question, I think it's important for athletes to know, and this is something that sounds really, really simple, but I don't even know that, as even with my history of training and my mental health background and all of my experience, this is still something difficult for me to know that whatever you're feeling won't stick around. Like, even if it's joy, you know, it's going to pass. And so to be able to have the resilience and the mindset to say, this really sucks right now, or there's a part of me that feels really, really awful, but also have that little thing in the back of your head that knows, like, this isn't permanent. Because I think sometimes when we start to think about addressing the emotion or labeling it, there's a part of us that maybe believes that if we, you know, say it out loud, then that means it's going to, you know, get more teeth or whatever. But the reality is, and what I've seen over and over again in my own life and with my clients, is if we can actually call it what it is and then breathe and allow it to be, sometimes it just passes because we've just given it the space it needs. And so I think when we're talking about performance in the sport and, you know, anything that might be going on outside of your life, you want to start to practice with giving yourself some grace. Like if you've just gotten a huge fight with your spouse and then you're starting a game, you might be a little rattled. And, you know, there are techniques to kind of calm the nervous system and things like that. And this is some of the things that, you know, we kind of alluded to the whole mindfulness thing and the awareness piece, and then breath to calm the nervous system so that you can actually make a different choice of what you want to, you know, think about and feel about. But I think it's just important to know that, like, unless you're a robot, you're not going to be able to exist in a silo, or like a, I don't know, CIA operative or Navy SEAL or something like that who've been specifically trained in that. So I think we just have to give ourselves grace and allow for the human moments, and then get yourself back on track when you can. And I think all of the moving parts, having someone that you can talk to, if it's a trained therapist, you know, that's awesome. They can definitely support you. If it's a friend, just a sounding board. Some people are different kinds of processors. They need to say it out loud to get it off their chest, or, you know, some more internal processing where, you know, they want to kind of work through it in their own minds first. So just, I think having grace around the fact that you're a human being and you are going to have emotions. We all do. And sometimes it can be kind of a both and. Sometimes our ability to actually sit with a really uncomfortable emotion can support us in beefing up our own self-confidence and how resilient we actually are. And that could actually, you know, translate to even greater performance too. So I said a lot there, so I'll just pause.
You did a great job of tying it all together. That's perfect, Erika. And I love that there's this this non-identification with the emotion. Instead, I've heard a lot of people use the word experience. I'm experiencing an emotion. My dad used to make a joke whenever I would say I'm hungry and I wanted food. He would say, "You're not hungry, you're Quentin." And when I think back to that, that actually is it's really a pretty heartwarming thing to say and to feel, is like, no, I'm actually just experiencing hunger. Just like you can experience pain doesn't mean that I'm always going to be in pain, or just because I feel sadness doesn't mean I'm depressed, right? And so really, really powerful takeaways there. And I also heard you kind of give some tools, such as the breath, or such as slowing down, or maybe asking questions, journaling, or having people speak out loud what they're experiencing, right? And I want to pass this over to Kimberly, actually. And what can coaches in particular, there's a lot of coaches joining us, what can they do to sort of get in our shoes and support athletes in certain ways? Like, what are some tools they can do to make this more manageable for athletes?
Well, I think there's sort of two things or two perspectives here. I think the coach first has to understand that there's a power differential between them and their players. So for a lot of cases, athletes may not feel comfortable expressing their emotions, especially if they may relate to playing time or, other kids in the team or whatever it is. Like, there are different reasons why athletes aren't necessarily comfortable speaking with their coaches about it. So one perspective is that can be really helpful if you have the resources, is to have a mental health clinician or a mental skills coach or somebody assigned to your team who can do that work with the athletes and in a confidential way, so that the athlete can feel like they can go to somebody confidentially. Maybe they have an issue with the coach, and you want that athlete to be able to work that out with somebody in a way where it doesn't get in the way of their playing time. Like, that's the role I play now on the Harvard hockey team. And it's very clear to the players. They can tell me anything. I won't say a word to the coach, and the coach is completely on board with that. So that's one perspective that can work. But the other thing, just in general, coaches at all levels, I think, and someone was talking about this earlier, actually, Q, I think it was you, just about how, or maybe it was Miriam earlier, but how athletes today, these young athletes, are really, they need that from their coaches now, the ability to express emotions and have them be validated, more so than when I was a kid playing. It's very different now. Like, coaches have to get more in tune with emotions and the role they play in performance, the role they play in overall well-being of their athletes. Just as a coach may, really be on top of you about making sure you're getting adequate nutrition, getting adequate sleep, whatever it is, it's the same thing for their mental health. You need to be taking care of yourself. And so to be really taking care of yourself, coaches need to be able to be open and be able to hear what their athletes have to say about how they're feeling emotionally, and not look at that as a weakness. Look at that as just something they're going through that they need some support with.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I want to take some other perspectives on this same question too. Thank you so much, Kim. Neha, do you have anything you'd like to add to this? Like, as far as tools that coaches can use and leverage when working with this emotional resiliency they're trying to build in their athletes?
Yeah, I think, to everyone who spoke to today's point, it is something that we find to be new in the rhetoric of coaching, and an additional piece to coaching that we have not thought about. And in the past, at least the way I was acculturated to sport, it was all about numbing yourself and your emotion and suppressing everything you could so that you could do the thing that your coach was asking you to do. And oftentimes, the types of, everyone's smiling because I'm sure you've all heard it, suck it up and you got this and so what, who cares, I don't care, that kind of rhetoric is what we learned. But then we see the evolution of great athletes like Simone Biles saying, hey, I matter, my mental health matters, and I'm still a great athlete and I can still walk away with a gold medal doing that. It flips the notion of, emotions do matter on its head a little bit for at least my generation of athletes. So I think for coaches who've also gone through that, it's also a hard look at what they think makes a successful athlete and gives them a successful performance, it's probably not what they grew up thinking. And having to actually do the work and sit with the cognitive dissonance of maybe the tough love that I was, that made me get my best out is not actually how I want to coach. So there's a perspective shift that needs to happen. It might not be a particular tool, but just a whole understanding that the athlete is a whole person, that they're coming with their whole body and being to play the sport, to do the performance. And so you have to think about that, all of that when you're there. And I think the second piece is also, to that same degree, staying within your parameters as a coach of focusing on performance. So many times coaches will say, you got to lose weight, or you're fat, or, they'll talk about other elements of the athlete, but the performance. And I think if you can start talking or explaining what you're demanding from the athlete through solely a performance-based kind of perspective, I think things will shift, where it's not about, hey, you have to lose 10 pounds. It's, hey, we need to shave off 10 seconds from your wind sprint, or we need to see if we can make 7 out of 10 second serves in a row here. Not, you need to be mentally tougher so you stop double faulting. So I think a lot of it is about the language we're using and what we're focused on as coaches. Knowing that the athlete is a whole person coming in with all that and saying, hey, this isn't about you personally and shaming you into doing what I want you to do, but motivating you intrinsically to get there. And although that's not a one-size-fits-all solution, it's just sort of a shift that I think will help with changing the culture.
Beautiful perspective. I just saw Erika come off mute. Do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, well, I love what Neha said. And, I don't know if you've heard, there's a quote, and I can't remember who it's by, but it says something to the effect of, the success of an organization is as strong as its leadership, or as healthy as its leadership. And so, I think that unfortunately, this kind of falls back on the coaches. The more okay you are in terms of your emotional and your mental health, the more you make it welcome, your own emotions, your own feelings, taking care of yourself, the way that you practice that will trickle down to your team. I can see it from a systems perspective with my marriage and family therapy training, but it's also just organizational leadership. So I just think that that's an important piece. And I know coaches wear a gazillion hats, and this may sound like a tall order, but I think if you really want a successful and healthy team in all arenas, not just the physical performance, but on the emotional and mental health side, taking care of your own mental health as a coach and your own emotional health is really, really imperative.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, Erika, because I'm sure there are some coaches that are on here that are thinking to themselves, if I wasn't taught this and I wasn't modeled it, how am I supposed to teach it? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of coaches, there's a lot of, folks that have never been to a therapist, have never really shared their heart openly. And so, asking them to do this is a tall task. Coaches are definitely tasked with a tall order these days. As will the kids, eventually have to cater to the next demographic. But I want to hear from the rest of the panel. I also saw that Miriam dropped in a note here. It definitely forces coaches to reflect on what they were coached on. Just like I mentioned, how they were programmed or how they went through sport and what got them the most out of their sport, and knowing that there's not necessarily one way. I think that's one thing I like to remind people, is that there's a lot of different ways to get to San Francisco from San Diego. There's a lot of different ways you can go. And there's a lot of effective ways. So I want to open it up to the rest of the panel. If there's any other tidbits or tools that you'd like to offer to the audience here when it comes to helping coaches really step into that, embody it, and teach their athletes about, how to be self-aware emotionally and then regulate their emotions.
Sure, I'll piggyback on what Erika and Neha spoke about. I thought Neha made a great point, which can be really helpful to coaches, which is You can have athletes that experience kind of a wide range of emotions and still be performing at the highest level. So just because we experience negative emotions, that doesn't mean we can't perform well, which I think is, does definitely help coaches just in terms of philosophy. And I loved what Erika said about, it really has to start with the coach, their own self-awareness of their thoughts and how they manage their emotions really serves as a guide. And they don't have to be perfect at it, but it can be kind of a learning process. And I think one important piece is the culture that they create on the team. There was a recent article in the Harvard Business Review, and it looked at a 2-year longitudinal study that was done by Google, where they looked at these different high-performing teams and what were kind of the unique characteristics of the ones that were most successful. And what they found was that there was an atmosphere of psychological safety. So creating an environment where, our athletes, where our coaches, where our support staff feel comfortable just talking about this topic more. And I think, Q, what you said was so important. It can feel a little bit daunting to coaches, like here's another component that I have to work on. But they don't have to do this all themselves. I mean, we all have, we as psychologists, sports psychologists, have expertise in this area. And just like, they would have support staff around physical injuries, strength and conditioning training, things of that nature. I mean, sports psychologists can kind of serve that role.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Shira. Kimberly, do you want to have anything you'd like to add, or anyone else before we pass it over to our next set of guests?
I saw something pop up, a question from the chat, just that asking if emotions are negative. And I like to kind of say it's all based on your perception. So even if you are having anxiety, if there's a part of you that's able to zoom out and say, I can actually use this for something that that can actually motivate me to take my action step or whatever it is. I think it's kind of challenging sometimes because we have kind of that, oh, this is a negative or a positive emotion. But I think practicing zooming out and saying it's all how you narrate it and it's all like your perspective, that really can inform the experience of the emotion as it's occurring.
I love that, Erika. Yeah, emotions don't have to be positive or negative. It's just the story that you create around them, right? Again, kind of reverting back to those thoughts. It really does start with our thoughts and how we are programming our own thoughts. So with that being said, thank you so much to our panelists. I know that some notes were just dropped in the chat for you all to follow them, check them out on LinkedIn, check out their websites. I want to make a personal thank you to Miriam for putting this on and for having me as a moderator, and I'm going to pass it back over to you.